Sports betting season's in full force with the NFL officially back, which means you need a sports book with integrity and longevity like BetUS. BetUS has been pioneers in the sportsbook industry for almost 3 decades, thriving and paying their loyal customer base. And they have loads and bonuses. Just join now at betus.com today and receive a 125% sign-up bonus by using bonus code Chicago125. BetUS is known as America's favorite sportsbook for a lot of reasons. BetUS has all your NFL games with team and player props and loads of NFL futures and odds. In addition to the NFL, you can bet on college football games, PGA golf, UFC matches, and more. They have every bet type imaginable, and the BetUS mobile platform is easy to use with full betting options. Follow my lead and get your phone, online, and social sports betting partner with integrity and longevity like I did. Cash in on your 125% sign-up bonus at betus.com with our code Chicago125. BetUS. You bet, you win, you get paid. BetUS.
Welcome back, Bears fans, to another episode of the Chicago Audible, and welcome to our Week 1 Chicago Bears postgame show. As our Bears, they hung around for a little bit, but then towards the end of the game, the cap just kind of broke off there. 34-14 was the final score as the Bears start the season 0-1, just like the rest of the NFC North. Still doesn't make this loss any easier to digest. I'm Earl Soldowit, and tonight I'm joined by both my co-hosts Nicholas Moriano and Mason West immediately after this Bears game. And guys, was that what you expected? Nick, I'll go to you first.
It kind of was. I didn't think the Bears had a chance in this one. Yes, they hung around at the halfway marker there, but then you saw what the Bears are and what the Rams really are as a team right now into Week 1 of this NFL season. So, yeah, them losing the way they did, were there some things that were surprising? Yeah, but we'll talk about that in depth, but I definitely planned on them losing. We all did.
Besides Mason, he stuck his neck out a bit, had that victory predicted in our preview show. And Mason, I like the artwork that you were working on before we went live. What's that sign say? Free Justin?
Yep, free Justin. Let him go. Let him roll.
Hey, they let him out of his cage a couple of times this afternoon. We'll talk about that when we get to the offense. But guys, I'm excited to begin this post-game show, our 7th year of doing post-game show. So let's go ahead and jump right on in and start our opening drive. And I'm going to go ahead and begin this by sharing my monster moment of the game, which is the most crucial moment, the turning point, the difference maker. So my monster moment for Week 1 is going to be with 11:46 left. The Bears had a 1st and 10 from the Rams 25. They're only down 13 at the time. Dalton was pressured. He was able to break free from Aaron Donald, but still ended up being sacked for a loss of 15, which the Bears could not overcome. Ended up turning it over on downs on a failed 4th and 15. It was looking like another touchdown drive for the Bears, which would have been back-to-back touchdown drives. It would have made it a 1-score game before that setback. And why is this important? Well, on the very next Rams drive, that was a slow, methodical drive that ended up in a touchdown. So it went from a possible 27-21 game to a 34-14 game, just like that. So that sack on Andy Dalton on 1st down to kind of kill that possible scoring drive for the Bears is going to be my Week 1 monster moment. And Nick, I'll hand it over to you. What's going to be your opening statement to kind of just start things off here for us?
Yeah, so if you guys haven't seen the latest 1920 football drive, in that episode, Eddie Jackson says, everybody can tackle. And you know what? And he said, you don't get paid for making tackles. You get paid for making interceptions. Well, what you saw today from Eddie Jackson was that not everybody can tackle, because the one who's saying it has struggled with this. I would say almost like the simplest form of playing like a defensive player needs to do is tackle. And we saw that on the one play, the deep play to Van Jefferson. Doesn't touch the guy who's on the ground, ends up scoring. The 3rd and 13, where Eddie Jackson has the angle, and then Cooper Kupp somehow converts that late in the game on a 3rd and 13. Eddie Jackson, everybody can't tackle. You can't tackle especially. And that is what I kind of want to get off my chest. I know a lot of people, and we'll probably talk about that as this show continues, but that for somebody who's being paid as much as he is, who was supposed to be a leader on this defense, that's unacceptable. And I'm sure we'll talk about it as this show goes on, but that is what I wanted my segment to be about: Eddie Jackson and his lack of tackling.
Nick coming out spicy, throwing some hands here to start it off, and that one really irritated me as well. Once we get to the third quarter of a show, we need to really rip apart this Bears defense, which shouldn't be too hard. The Rams showed that here earlier today as well. But Mace, I want to go over to you. What's going to be a stat that stands out that's like indicative of how this game kind of unfolded here today? What's your standout stat?
I think for me, it has to be the discrepancy between the run game and the pass game between the two teams. The Bears averaged 4.4 yards per pass this game, while the Rams averaged 11.6. Now, obviously, there were some really, really big pass plays that the Rams had, blown coverages, all that stuff we're going to get into. But one of the problems that we talked about potentially going into this game, and one of the issues we had in previous years, was lack of explosive plays. And that's all it was. Too many times, the Bears ended in the Rams' territory. And that problem was there's only so many plays you can get together, right? The defense gets paid too, and eventually they're going to get some stops. So you have to get large chunk plays to really get down the field. And when you're averaging 4.4 yards per pass play, that's just not going to get it done.
Nope, it didn't get it done tonight, and I want to talk about that lack of explosiveness once we get into the second quarter of the show, which is just a matter of moments. Before we officially get to that segment here, I just want to make sure people know if they're wondering, hey, who is the most valuable Bear? We'll get to that towards the end of the show, so stick around for that. I'm sure there's a candidate in mind for you, myself, Nick, and Mason. There may be a consensus one, but we'll see how it all pans out. So let's jump into that second quarter of the show, and let's talk about this Chicago Bears offense. Real rough start, at least for Andy Dalton, but he was able to bounce back somewhat. Nick, in Dalton's Chicago Bears debut, what did you like? What didn't you like? And ultimately, is he a guy this Bears team can win with?
I think so. I think the Bears can win with Andy Dalton, and obviously they didn't do it in this matchup against the Rams, but you saw what Andy Dalton, like even in the pocket, despite it collapsing on him many, many times, and really that, I think, kind of equated to that rough start that he had. The interception that he threw, inexcusable. I don't even know. Honestly, I don't know who he was even targeting. It was kind of in between two players, so I had no idea who he was targeting there. And the fumble happened. There was pressure in the face, trying to throw the ball. It happens. But I thought he made, after those two bad plays, those two turnover plays, I thought he played well. He got the ball out to the guys they need to get the ball out to. There weren't a lot of deep, explosive opportunity kind of plays called in this game. And so Andy Dalton was giving it to his playmakers. And there were even some times where he's showing some maneuverability in the pocket. Aaron Donald could have had him a couple more times, but showing that wiggle, showing that ability to kind of get upfield and, slide to get the first down a couple of times. So I thought with what he was working with, what was being called, he executed. And then those two turnovers, just, obviously you're going to look back at it. That is why Andy Dalton, there's still these question marks. You can't have that from a veteran type of player.
Yeah, you can't. To start the season, the way the Bears did with that really strong kickoff return by Khalil Herbert, then a big run from David Montgomery, you march right into the red zone. You're ready to seize momentum right out of the gate on the road in prime time under the lights. Like, this is everything you coach up for. And then he squandered it with that red zone interception right there in the end zone, which really kind of took the wind out of the sails for the Bears early, and it took them a long time to kind of fight back through and reclaim some of that momentum. I want to go over to you, Mason. What are your thoughts on Andy Dalton? Is he better than what we had at quarterback last year? I know you had the free Justin sign, so I'd be curious what your thoughts are about this Bears offense with Andy Dalton, obviously not being explosive like we were all hoping or expecting this Bears offense to at least try some of those plays.
I feel bad for Andy Dalton because he was okay. The way he played, you can win with a quarterback like that. It is possible, but you need your defense to be lights out, right? You need to be almost perfect with penalties. You can't have the injuries. There needs to be some more pushing down the field by him. But that's where my problem lies, is that we saw today that the defense isn't elite anymore. We saw that, there are all these little holes here and there. While there's a lot more speed on the offense, are there really football players who are going to make those plays, make people miss? I don't know what the yards after catch was this game, but it cannot be that high overall. Like, there's this one series with 4:50 left in the first. They start off with a pitch to Williams for a loss of 3. You just had David Montgomery. He had 3 carries for 57 yards, and that's all he had in the first quarter. Why'd you go away from him? Then you ran it to Ramsey's side of the field. He's all over the place. Why are you going towards him?
Right.
And then you put Fields in, and it's a reverse to Goodwin. Like, why do you have him in the game if you're going to do that? And again, it's to Ramsey's side of the field. If you're going to do reverse it away. And then you have, a screen pass to Mooney, and then why do you have Bird blocking for him? Like, it's just weird play calls. Like, then you have a 4th and 4. Dalton fumbles the ball where Jason Peters gave Hollins basically a free run because it didn't look like he knew who he was supposed to block. Weird play calling, and that's just not setting Andy Dalton up for success. His ball placement was okay. There were too many times where the ball was behind receivers. Just one play in mind to Allen Robinson where he probably should have had the catch, but still give him a chance to not just catch the ball, but get yards after the catch. And Willie, you and I talked about this right before we went on. This was probably, in my opinion, the worst kind of game you can have because he wasn't terrible. That's the thing. Like, he had times where, oh, look at that. He went through his progression. He did better than what Mitch did last year, right? He was able to go through and find people. It just wasn't consistent enough because you can't have that many dink and dunks. He moved better than Nick Foles did. He had a couple of scrambles. But it wasn't good enough to elevate so that you can win this game. This was a very winnable game. And if you just, free Justin, I think you could do that.
So Andy Dalton, he finished 27-38, 206 yards, 0 touchdowns to 1 interception. My quick assessment of this Dalton's play, very reminiscent of you guys. It seemed like, again, better than what we had last year. He was able to go. I mean, his time to throw was quick. I mean, they're mentioning it in a broadcast. Like, he was getting that ball out in a hurry, and I thought he was able to move the ball downfield. But once we got closer, like in the red zone area, we just weren't able to really put it all together. That's when you see him putting in Justin Fields a little bit more. I'm excited to talk about him in just a few minutes. And again, I feel like if we're not able to get over the hump still offensively, if we're only scoring 14 points a game, we're not going to win many football games. So 20 points still seems to be like a weird ceiling that this Bears offense has. It's nice to see Dalton's ability to kind of spread the ball around. I still feel like we're not getting the yak because receivers still have to like stand still. Like, they're running like deep curls and, hey, we're going to sit here and now you're going to throw it to me. Like, why can't we hit guys in stride? They did a few slants like Damian Williams towards the end of this game, which got a little bit additional yardage after the catch. Cole Comet did some nice things with the football in his hands too, but I want to see some of these deep shots, at least intermediate, test it out a little bit, force that defense to play back just some because they kept everything short and it was a little too vanilla for an offense that I thought was so under wraps in the preseason. We see something, it doesn't even need to be exotic, but just mildly aggressive would be okay by me. So up next, we're going to talk about Justin Fields and his involvement. He was out there a little bit, which I'm sure brought a smile to your face, as it did ours. But first, I need to tell you a little bit about our friends. They have a message for you, and those friends are our friends over at Manscaped. Attention listeners across the galaxy, all the way from Australia to Houston, do we have a pube problem? If so, our friends at Manscaped have cleared you for takeoff with their 4th generation and brand new Lawnmower 4.0. Kick your pubes to the next planet with the Performance Package 4.0. The orbits in your pants will feel like you're in zero gravity when you use the best tools for the job from the leaders in male grooming. So join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get your rocket ready for takeoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code FANSIDED20. Inside this package, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver and ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance Boxer briefs, which I'm wearing right now. They're pretty comfy, by the way, and a travel bag to hold your whole solar system. The Weed Whacker is also waterproof and uses a 9,000 RPM motor-powered 360-degree rotary dual-blade system. This nose and ear hair trimmer provides proprietary skin-safe technology, which helps prevent nicks, snags, and tugs in those delicate holes. So again, you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code FANSIDED20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code FANSIDED20 at manscaped.com. For a clean trinity and beyond, your Spaceballs will thank you. All right, you're listening to the Chicago Audible Podcast. This is our Week 1 postgame show. Bears lose 34-14. We're sitting here in the second quarter of our show talking about this Bears offense. And guys, it's time to talk about Justin Fields in regular season action. Nick, I want to go to you first. Were you surprised to see Justin out there today? And also, do you think they leverage his strengths? Because I would say no.
No, I mean, when you're bringing him in to run an end around, it's like, what are you doing there? And we've seen plays like that for the Bears. They haven't been very successful. But was I surprised to see him in? I guess I'm like yes and no, because Ian Rappaport had a report earlier today saying, hey, there could be some packages. So I kind of prepared myself to see him. I just didn't know what type of plays, but it kind of was what I was maybe anticipating. Like, oh, you're going to use him on running type plays, things like that. Is he really going to have an opportunity to pass? And he did to Marquise Goodwin. But look, when you capitalize on his strengths, obviously a touchdown that he scored, running that 4.4 speed, that's exactly what you can utilize in a Justin Fields. So it wasn't too surprising. It's just like there's no reason. The shovel pass, the end around, you're getting too cute with him. He could throw the ball too. Bring him in to do some of those things, and then we can, have this conversation going, because Matt Nagy actually said because the Bears were down, it actually limited the snaps that Fields was supposed to see tonight. So, if it was a closer game, probably would have seen Justin Fields more.
Man, well, that's upsetting, to say the least. Mason, I want to go over to you. I know that Justin had that touchdown run, but Nick said it. A shovel pass? An end around? Like, what are you doing? And I felt like Justin's one pass to Goodwin to start things off, his first snap as a pro, was probably the pass I saw with the most zip by a Bears quarterback all game long. Do you expect this to maybe be like a launching pad where maybe they slowly keep growing Fields and folding him into the offense a little bit more? So we saw him for 4 plays today. So maybe next week you're looking at like 6 to 8. Is that something that you would envision happening here?
It is so hard to say because I can't get a read on what the Bears and Nagy are doing. When I first saw that report today by Rappaport, my first thought was why? Because there's all these things like, oh, don't put him in because he's going to get hurt, or like Dalton has to give us the best chance to win, and it's like, if all of those things are true, why are you putting him out there at all? And like Nick was saying, if it really was that he was going to get more plays if they were winning, if it was closer, like I don't understand the thought process there either. So I can easily convince myself, yes, Will, that he's going to just ramp him up slowly, that he's 6 to 8 plays, then all of a sudden it's 12, and then, slowly but surely by week whatever, now it's like, ooh, look at the seamless transition they did to Dalton. I could also see all of a sudden him coming out and saying, we're starting we're starting Fields week 2. I could also see him coming out and saying, you know what, no, Justin did fine, he did what he's supposed to, and he only gets 4 to 6 plays for the foreseeable future. It's weird. It's odd. There's no thought process, it seems like, behind it. Because when you, not just what we saw on the field actually play-wise, but the reaction from the players, like you could tell there was more juice. I mean, obviously a lot of that's coming just from sitting on my couch watching it, but the players on the field were pumped during that, during that touchdown run, on that pass, things of that nature. So why not feed off of that?
Agreed 100%. Sticking with just the Bears and the passing game, Nick, was there any targets, whether tight end, running back, wide receiver, that stood out to you? Again, not a lot of big plays. The longest play we had was a 19-yarder to Marquise Goodwin. So no explosive pass plays officially, because that would be 20 or more yards. So we kept it pretty short, as we've mentioned. But was there someone that was maybe more involved or more impactful or more consistent that you thought heading into this game?
Actually, I'll take it the exact opposite, because at one point in the game, I'm like, does Jimmy Graham still exist? Is he still on this Bears team? Because you just didn't see number 80 out there until he makes the third down. Believe it was a third down reception against Jalen Ramsey. Just seeing like how, and we talked about that, you guys, like how involved is Jimmy Graham going to be in this game? So that kind of definitely stood out to me, because it was a lot of Cole Comet, which it should be, but for the money that Jimmy Graham's making, it's like, I think I just retweeted how many snaps he had out of 69 plays. He was out there for 14 of them. Cole Komet for 51. So I think the 14's more than what I actually thought initially it was. So that kind of stood out to me. But for guys that were actually being involved, it was like Darnell Mooney got some targets in this game, but it's not necessarily the targets that you want to see, right? You want to see those explosive opportunities. There was not really any of that. The one play happened on, what was it, the 4th and 15. That pass went to Darnell Mooney along that right sideline, but really everything was shorter, and that's what the Rams defense does to you. It wants you to throw those shorter passes, but you need to at least attempt something. The Bears didn't even want to do that. That goes to Matt Nagy and the play calling, but I guess what stood out, Darnell Mooney, how they used him, short area, and yes, he can make people miss, but you have that speed, you got to at least give him attempts to at least utilize it.
Yeah, he averaged only 5 yards per catch, 5 catches, 26 yards. How about you, Mason? Anyone stand out, good, bad, or otherwise?
I mean, I thought Marquise Goodwin had an overall pretty solid game. 4 receptions, 45 yards, 4 targets. His was 19, but that was a short pass that became 19, not necessarily what you thought he might do attacking deep. I agree with what Nick was saying too. You think that they manufacture some more deep plays with some of the play calling and scheming. Yes, the Rams really dare you to run the ball, pass it short with the way that they play their defense. But there's a lot of times where Ramsey was basically playing as a linebacker. That was the whole point of this new season, was moving him around, because he, as Ramsey even said, and they said on the broadcast, he got bored because teams weren't targeting him. So now if you have Jalen Ramsey playing up in the box, basically, you're telling me that you don't have a play call that has a crosser, a wheel route of some kind that can get one of your speedsters that have been talking up this whole summer. Bird, Goodwin, Mooney, any of these people. Damian Williams is a great back to catch. Don't forget Montgomery has got great hands. You can't get them out in open space on a pass that goes further than 10 yards. And obviously the game plan was to move it quick because they didn't want Donald involved. But you got to create something down the field, man.
You do. That's kind of been our gripe throughout this show so far. I'm glad you mentioned Goodwin. He was my X factor heading into the game. I wanted the Bears to have a wideout number 3 be involved. Didn't expect him to end up as the leading receiver here today. But for a guy that took a year off and we didn't see him in the preseason, this is a really strong debut, and I'm hoping he can continue to build off of. I want to take a moment to highlight Cole Komet. 5 catches, 42 yards, and he was just so tough to take down. Those angry runs again, Nick, they were coming back here today. It took multiple Rams to bring Cole Komet down every time he touched that football, and I like seeing that aggressiveness from him, and I'm excited to see how they can continue to build off of this as well. Again, Komet, someone had a real quiet first half of last season, really came on late, and for him to be as involved as he was here week 1, let's see how this can help in the early stages of this season. So I thought he had a real strong game. See what they can do with him more, and we'll see what happens with Jimmy Graham. Nick, like you said, let's now focus on this Bears rushing attack, which is a bright spot here today. David Montgomery, 108 yards on 16 carries. Again, that long of 41 to kind of kick things off today. What I saw from David Montgomery was what we've heard about all offseason, and that's that he's faster. And Nick, I know you saw that in camp, but I didn't get to see it in preseason too much. So I was a little, I was nervous to see it. I was like, well, let's see if he actually does look quicker. Can I actually tell on TV? And I definitely can tell this evening, like, he was hitting those holes, and his ability to move laterally, but also still be gaining yards at the same time was ultra impressive. He just looked quick and fluid out there, and also still tough as nails, and one of the most difficult backs in the entire league to take down. What did you like out of Mr. David Montgomery in his season opener, Nick?
I really just liked what he continued from last season, showing that relentlessness to not go down. That's what David Montgomery's known for. And he actually complained about that in training camp because a lot of the plays are blown dead. You're not really completing the full tackle. It's like you're taking away David Montgomery, one of his best attributes. And now that he got to go against an opposing team, you saw that. There were a couple of defensive linemen that had him, they bear hugged him. And somehow David Montgomery's able to get away, get positive yards, put his hand in the dirt, and just crawl forward for whatever he can get. So you saw a guy that showed good vision, and you need to do that, especially with what I was saying in the previous show, this gap and a half system. You need to be able to identify those rushing lanes and those cutback lanes. And that's what David Montgomery did, and he did that with physicality as well. Like you said, 108 yards, a 1 touchdown run. He breaks a tackle from Aaron Donald. Like, that is exactly what you need to do, and David Montgomery showed that.
How did the Bears open up those lanes today, Nick, based off of what you saw? I saw a decent amount of misdirection. So it kind of got those guys out of their gaps a little bit, which helped open up in the middle of the field. But also I thought the offensive line, at least the interior, on some of these plays did a good job of, creating the space needed. But I'm just curious if you saw anything special today.
I think what really worked is that the Bears were able to hold their blocks just long enough. Just be in position to where when David Montgomery sees that, hey, the defender's on the opposite side of the offensive lineman, that's where I need to cut back. So I think what the offensive line did moving horizontally helped David Montgomery find those cutback lanes and just able to get yards. And even when it didn't, it was that individual effort. So it was a combination of both. And I think as the game kind of wore on, you saw the offensive line and some of those holes kind of open up and things like that. But I would say for the most part, yeah, the offensive line was able to create some things for David Montgomery.
How about you, Mason? Any thoughts on David Montgomery's day, the Bears' rushing attack in general? I mean, he's about it, but if you want to throw anything else, you can.
I mean, I was going to say overall, I mean, Damon Williams was a bit disappointing. 6 carries on, I guess, 12 yards. So averaging 2. Nothing really to speak of there. Obviously, Montgomery went out for a little bit with a potential hand injury, and everyone, held their breath there because if he didn't return or was going to be out for any extended period of time, you're now actually worried what's actually going to happen there. But the interior of the line overall did really well. Daniels, Whitehair, Mustafer, they were able to handle their blocks. Aaron Donald didn't make a lot of noise till the end of the game. There was a couple plays where on the broadcast, they did specifically highlight what Daniels was able to do. I think they used the Rams' aggressiveness against them a little bit, let them get upfield, and like Nick said, get just enough of them to create that lane. And Monty is just so wiggly, right? He just is able to contort his body in a way that he needs a really small gap and stay so low to the ground that he's able to generate, a lot of force moving forward there. So again, like we talked about at the beginning, it was a little weird that he had 3 carries through the first quarter and then he had 16 by the end. It's like they finally realized, oh, wait, maybe we should keep running the ball here. But realized it a little too late because now you're playing from behind a bit more. So that overall was disappointing, but, at least Montgomery was a bright spot.
Yeah, and on his touchdown drive, I mean, he was a focal point throughout the entirety of that drive. The Bears leaned on him heavily, and it was a big reason why they're able to kind of march their way into the end zone. But still, a real strong debut. We're just still having the issue where I bet you, though, if he didn't have to leave, as long as he did with that hand-finger issue, I bet you he would have had 20 touches or 20 carries.
Oh, absolutely. It was just odd that at the beginning of the game, when in theory, the game's closer and you can really establish that time of possession and you can really churn, that he only had 3 by the end of that first quarter.
Right.
It took a little while to get involved. But yeah, absolutely. If he hadn't gone out, you probably would have been well above that 20 touch mark.
I was looking at the 16, I'm like, we still haven't gotten 20. But I forgot for a moment that he did take some of that time away. It looked like a finger dislocation potential issue. I don't know if, Mason, you want to speculate, but they're yanking on it, a couple of different doctors, and he immediately was like ripping his glove off after the tackle. Had to go to the locker room real quick. At least he was able to come back from it. Those are more minor injuries. And for Montgomery, who is such a big focal point, we can't have him going down with anything more serious at this stage, if ever. Well, definitely ever. Nick, how about you? There's one thing I wanted to ask you, because Mason said that the interior of the line did well, but I think I saw a tweet from you that you were a little displeased about Cody Whitehair.
Yeah, I think obviously there was only was it 1 or 2 sacks Aaron Donald had finished with on the night, but there were plays where Donald didn't hit home and was using his little jump chop block move. And look, it's Aaron Donald. I get it. But if the All-22 comes out, because I know there's been a huge issue with that this season for some reason, there are definitely some plays on there where it's like, man, okay, Aaron Donald's back there. I think there's a couple of other guys. But I think at that point, a little fed up with the Bears. But I still think that there are definitely a couple of times throughout this game where Cody Whitehair and Aaron Donald, it went Aaron Donald's way. And that makes sense. It's Aaron Donald, the best defensive player in football.
All right, I want to talk about this offensive line here a little bit. We talked about the interior playing well. I'll go to Mason first. What are your thoughts about the tackle situation? And the reason I'm going to you first is Jason Peters and Larry Borum did go down with injuries today. I don't know if you saw anything special or have any speculation from your physical therapy side of your brain, but figured to kind of kick things off with you, because if both are gone and we have to start Elijah Wilkinson at left tackle, we could be in for a tough little stretch here.
Yeah, initially, you're pretty happy, at least I was, with what the tackles looked like at first. Jason Peters, he had that pancake block on Taylor Rapp as he was blitzing around that left edge, and you're like, oh, look at that. All right, he's got some spryness to him. And then I think it was literally a play or 2 later when he actually went out. I believe that looked like soft tissue, the quad, and that one can be a bit concerning. We'll have to see what actually comes from it. But, especially the older you get, it's a little harder to come back from that soft tissue injury. Initially for Larry Borum, and he actually came in too and looked great. He had two blocks in a row, and that was on that David Montgomery touchdown. I thought it was a knee, but it came out that it was an ankle. And that one more likely would be something that you'd be less concerned about. Probably a sprain when you get rolled up like that. One would think it's just more of a lateral sprain, not something like bad, like a high ankle. That one takes a while to come back from. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously all the imaging and what they come back with, but probably a lighter week for Larry Borum, and I would imagine he's going to be able to come back this week. Jason Peters would be another question, but we were talking about that leading up to this first game, that we wouldn't be surprised if Larry Borum took over the left tackle position, right? Just basically Peters was there to give him some more time to get acclimated to the NFL, and apparently that's sooner than we thought. If you took the under of, one half of Jason Peters before he got hurt, then you won. Good job.
So I thought Larry Borum played really well too. Again, real small sample size, but on those plays, he didn't look out of place, and really it was a strong point out there on the left side of the offensive line. Let's kind of take a step back and look at the big picture of this offense. And I'm curious, Nick, I'll go to you first as we kind of wrap up this offensive discussion for this week 1 post-game show. What would you just say the story was? Was it missed opportunities? I mean, the Bears were in Rams territory 7 straight times and only had 14 points. So you're looking at 2 points every time you crossed the 50. 0 for 4 on third down to start. Ended up 5 of 11, which could have been way worse based off how it went. And also 0 for 4 on fourth down in general. But what would be the too long didn't read story of the Bears offense today for maybe someone who didn't watch the game?
Oh, man, so I think how I would describe it, like it looked in, bits and pieces, it looked better, right? Because the Bears were able to actually move the ball. They had the 24 first downs. It's just there's no explosiveness in this. And so you're really counting on this Bears offense to play a perfect game. Like the 16-play drive that they scored a touchdown on, that's impressive that they did that. But, man, if that's what's going to be the offense, then you're expecting everybody to execute on every single block. You can't have any negative plays like we saw on the wide receiver screen and the rounds. And you really just need to play perfect and play this long version of offense that's really not that sustainable. That's why explosive plays are so crucial. So there were areas that looked better. Like even Andy Dalton looked better than what we saw just even last season. And he played okay. He really did. So the quick dinner version is like there's progress, but not enough because the explosive plays are not there. You still have those 2 costly turnovers. And ultimately it's only 14 points. So that's obviously not going to do it. So that's like my biggest takeaway here. And there's a lot that still needs to be improved upon.
Right. And what makes the dangerous offenses in the NFL just so dangerous is their ability to be versatile. They can be the quick strike team. They can, if you punch, they'll punch you back. But also in the moments that it matters, they can take the air out of the football and just hold on to it and slowly move down the field. At least in this game, that was like the Bears' only shot of even potentially finding points was the slow, methodical dink and dunk. And don't make a mistake, like you said, Nick, because if we do, we're going to be off the field. Even if we try on that fourth down, we're still not going to make it. So I agree with you 100%, and I think that's what the Bears were missing. They're a one-trick pony, and it's not even a good trick to have. They're not a team that with the quick strike ability, but then also they go 3 and out a lot. They can move the ball slowly, but they still can't capitalize on those drives. How about you, Mason? Any final thoughts on this offense? Your biggest concern heading into week 2, or another positive that maybe we didn't mention here that's escaping our mind that you want to highlight real quick?
I guess there'd be 2 final thoughts. One, what is the reason why there aren't explosive plays? Was it the line issue, like you thought you wouldn't have time and you just needed to get it out of there fast? Was it, that your receivers weren't getting into the right position? Was it play calling? What was actually the reason? Because that has to get figured out ultimately before we can truly move forward. Or is it that you don't feel Andy Dalton can make that throw? The second point, if I see another wide receiver screen, if I see another one of those stupid little shovel passes, especially don't waste one of Justin Fields' only time on the field doing that dumb little shovel pass that worked one time in 2018 for a touchdown to Trey Burton, and that has never worked again. Stop it with the end arounds. Like the lateral movement, that's not explosive. That's not attack down the field. You don't have the people to do it. You don't have the blocking for it. You have Damiere Byrd out there blocking like we talked about earlier. Like when you see these explosive offenses, the Kyler Murrays, Jameis Winston put up 5 touchdowns today. You know why? He was throwing downfield. He wasn't throwing screen passes. Please, let's move on. Stop it.
I like the way you put it. And I do feel like some little things that we saw in this offense, you can tell they're built for the mobile quarterback like a Justin Fields, like those little read options, if they're even really, I don't think with Andy Dalton they're true read options. I think he's just carrying the boot after the fact. But at least if you had Justin Fields out there, the guy playing, on the edge has to honor that a little bit and can't just sell out going towards the running back. So ideally, once Justin's out there, those could be little wrinkles that this offense can add into. And with Justin's speed, those can be explosive plays, but still actually throwing the ball downfield is still escaping this Bears offense despite having 4 receivers with 4.2 40 speed. Blows my mind. Nick, how about you? Any final thoughts on offense?
I think in this will be something of conversation. I'm sure not just in this podcast, but moving forward. But if the Bears are going to look like this offensively, and obviously, like I said, with Andy Dalton, and that's where I'm going, Mason. If Andy Dalton he played okay, the best version of this offense is going to be with Justin Fields because of what you were just talking about, Will, what it opens up, what it does also for David Montgomery. And if the line is going to be missing some people, you want a guy like Justin Fields out there. So it's going to be something that I think Nagy, hopefully, is going to be thinking about. And is it unfair to Andy Dalton? Who's to say? But I think if that's what this offense is going to be, you need somebody that he could throw dink and dunk passes if that's what you're going to do. But I think he just opens up things. He really does. So obviously, I don't think they're going to be thinking too much into it after just 1 week. But I'm sure that talk is going to build up as we continue here through this 2021 NFL season.
Without a doubt. All right, I'm going to call that a wrap on our offensive discussion. So it is officially time to jump into the third quarter of our show, and let's talk about this Chicago Bears defense. And I think we need to just start where Nick kind of stopped it at the top of the show. And let's talk about these blown coverages. First series of each half led to 2 touchdowns. Nick, is this all safety play? I know it's hard to tell until you know what the play call was. You actually get a look at the all-22. The broadcast angles aren't super friendly. But either way, I think you're just totally disappointed in the Bears secondary here in general today, right? Because for the Rams, Stafford ended the day with 156.1 passer rating, 20-26, 321 yards, 3 touchdowns, and boy, did they make it easy for him.
They did, and is it just a safety thing or a secondary thing? It would help to have some pressure to have Stafford to accelerate his, just his play clock in his head, but it just seems like a communication thing, you guys. It's like, how are these guys running so wide open downfield? How come Marquise Christian is just passing a guy off to open field? It's like these things don't make sense. And with Sean Desai, yes, he's a first-year defensive coordinator, but he's been with the Bears for a while now. So those things are, to me, inexcusable. And ever since Vic Fangio left, these big coverage breakdowns have been happening way more frequently. So whatever's being taught, however it's being communicated, it's not hitting home to these players because clearly there's open, explosive plays happening, and Matthew Stafford is hitting those throws. If you're going to give him wide open, even Mitchell Trubisky's going to hit those throws. So that is an issue. And look at that graphic, you guys. They're just looking
insane
at Cooper Kupp. So it doesn't make any sense, but yet it keeps frequently happening, and that's going to doesn't matter how well the offense plays. If that keeps happening, they won't win many games.
No, this defense for a week was rough. And I know last year we started a little rough as well, but this felt a little bit different. Mason, on a scale 1 to 10, how concerned are you with this Bears defense after what you saw here tonight?
10. Absolutely 10. The strength of this defense before 2018, right, peak of this defense with Vic Fangio, was generating pressure, and getting sacks and making it so that the individuals like Kyle Fuller, Eddie Jackson, Prince Mukamura, they could attack moving forward because they were able to go downhill, making tackles, getting interceptions, pass breakups. They can't do that right now because Matt Stafford's able to sit back there and get rid of the ball relatively quickly. Not just that, obviously Nick mentioned Vic Fangio leaving. You also have personnel changes from 2018. I still think it's super underrated not having a guy like Adrian Amos in there because Adrian Amos was the one that was able to just go up and make the tackle almost every single time. He basically played like a hybrid linebacker, and he was consistent, right? He was there when you needed him to be there. And it's not just Eddie Jackson. Gibson, I don't know what he was doing on that one touchdown, both of them really, but the second one to Kupp, where he just let him run right by. I think, and you don't know that to watch the all-22 and everything, Marquise Christian passed him off to the next zone, and it's like, where are you in your zone? What are you doing? And then the first touchdown, when you have Eddie Jackson and Gibson standing right there, someone touched the guy. Like, like, you can't expect the person next to you to make the play. Make it yourself. In 2018, you would see a gang of Bears on the ball every single time, and that's not happening right now. So
Yeah.
whether it's a lack of passion or something like that, the entire defense just is super off. It's getting older. There's not a pipeline of young players you're super pumped about besides Jaylen Johnson and Roquan Smith. It's frustrating.
It sure is. I know Eddie Jackson switched to his college number 4, but he needs to remember it's the NFL and it's not college rules. The guys aren't down once they hit the turf. You still need to touch them. Regardless, man, I'm just nervous. The safeties didn't play like we are holding up to them to that standard. Like, they should play better than what we saw here today. But the one area that was a big concern heading into this game, and we knew it was, and it played like one, was that nickel corner position. Duke Shelley was a healthy scratch. So Marquis Christian jumped in there to nickel. Nick, I don't think the Bears have a nickel corner on this roster.
They don't have a good one. They have guys that will play the nickel corner position, but playing one effective, no. Because Marquis Christian got torched, and I thought he looked, somewhat decent in the training camp practices, but that's in practice. And when you see the games and the opposing teams and the players are going to have, Marquis Christian didn't hold up. And like you said, Duke Shelley was a healthy scratch. So the Bears thought Marquis Christian is our best option at the nickel corner position. That is scary. And it's not just, look, if that position is failing, the safeties that have continuity going in for, the second year, which Eddie Jackson hasn't had, they're struggling. Oh, man, you are just putting a bunch of inconsistency from that secondary level, and that can lead to a lot of more of these explosive plays happening. But it's very concerning to see that the Bears don't have a guy they can trust there, because after Marquis Christian's performance tonight, there's no way you can just say Duke Shelley's a healthy scratch. You need to see what they do in practice this week and go to the drawing board again, and that may not result to a better answer. Just another guy playing the position, and then we'll see what happens then.
Yeah, it's disappointing, discouraging, and a little worrisome all at the same time. And if they don't get this cleaned up here soon, again, we will talk about the lack of pressure here today, but I didn't expect the Bears to generate a ton of pressure. That wasn't a big concern. And I also knew that the Bears secondary would be tested, but the lapse of coverage and the absolute just blowness of them and how easy they made it for Matthew Stafford on some key downs was something I did not expect. Mason, I'll go over to you. We can switch to a positive if you want. I thought the Bears' running defense, or rush defense, for the most part of this game, played very well, especially without Eddie Goldman here today. I know towards the end, in the fourth quarter, the Rams were able to kind of get some more yards on the ground, but at one point, I think the Bears had over 100 yards, and the Rams had like 12.
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, the Rams' running game was not great. Darrell Henderson had 70 yards, but that's a bit of a misleading number because, like you said, they got some bigger chunks near the end as the defense fatigued a little bit and honestly probably got discouraged, to be completely honest, when you're down that much. There's not just much you can do about it. At the beginning, it was great. And when the Rams were trying to lean on the run a little bit, there were a couple of drives there, the Bears stopped them. Tonga did a good job subbing in there for Eddie Goldman. There was one play on that touchdown run that he was facing literally the other direction, and that's not what you want. But that was one play, and on the goal line, I mean, that's always tough. I mean, I'm not gonna assume my defense is gonna hold a team to a 3-and-out, 4-and-out every single time right on the goal line. That's just a cherry on top if they can do that. So, and I believe in it, leading up to this, that was the one area that actually got the Bears an advantage. It was the Bears run D against the Rams run offense. And I would say that for the most part held up. If any of the other three categories had turned to a positive, the Bears would have had a chance to win this game.
Really well said there, Mason. How about you, Nick? Your thoughts on the Bears' run defense? Were they playing at a higher level? Was that front seven playing well, or was it just a Rams struggling? I'd be curious which way you think this thing kind of leaned.
I think it was a little bit of both because I thought Akeem Hicks had a really good game. He was back there trying to disrupt Matthew Stafford and looking like, Akeem Hicks of old. So I think with the Rams are still trying to figure that out themselves, what their rushing attack is going to look like this season. And obviously they're down a running back this game, but they still had some capable guys. So I think it was a little bit of both. But the Bears, what I think at halftime, the Rams as a team had 7 carries for only 12 yards. So they did their job at taking away that side, that whole aspect of the Rams offense. It was just those darn explosive, blown coverage type of plays that, put the Rams in a position to, one, have the lead for the entire game, but also once it got to the fourth quarter, kind of opened things up as well. So, but to answer your question, I liked how the Bears played the run. And again, that's without Danny Trevathan, Alec Ogletree being in the spot there, and without Eddie Goldman as well. Obviously, a huge part of what is going to stop the run for future games. But I would say that they did a good job at that. And then, like Mason said, in the fourth quarter, some of those yards, not that they're misleading, but the game's over with by then. And so I liked what they did in that first half, and it carried over for a little bit into that third quarter.
It did, and I thought it wasn't all bad for the Bears defense. At one point, the Rams were 1 of 3 in the red zone. The Bears were bending due to some of these chunk plays, blown coverages, missed tackles, that leading a lot of yak. But once they got down to the red zone, they played well. I thought Jaylen Johnson had some good coverage on a third down, deep down the field early on this game, which could have been another easy play if not for him there. And the Bears on third down were able to get off the field most of the time. I think they ended up 6 of 11. Some of those came towards the end, but there was a point when they're under 50% and they're getting off the field every time they hit third down. The Rams were. So the Bears defense wasn't all bad, but when you can't cover and when you're allowing big plays, you can get off the field 7 times out of 10. But then 3 quick touchdowns just like that, with this Bears offense being as inept as it was in scoring, it's easy for your opponent here. I'll go over to you, Mason, next. Is there another player that stood out to you, good, bad, or otherwise? I know for me, my backbreaker matchup was Duke Shelley versus Cooper Kupp, which I changed to whoever's playing nickel versus Cooper Kupp. And there was that one play late in the third quarter where Christian got beat, allowed that in leverage by Cooper Kupp on third down, which he got down at the 1. They took back that touchdown, and the Rams were able to score on the very next play. So I know that was the person I was watching specifically in that situation, and it came up and reared its ugly head, unfortunately for us. But do you have any other players that stood out, really secondary, linebacker, defensive line, that you wanted to highlight here?
Yeah, I mean, Nick mentioned Akeem Hicks standing out, of course. He had a great game. He's definitely playing like a man who wants another contract, that's for sure. I think someone that was sneaky okay to good was Jaylen Johnson. He wasn't too often on the receiving end, I felt like, of some of those plays that we were really questioning here. It really was more heavily, Cooper Kupp out of the slot, beating up on like a Marquis Christian and the safety play. He almost had that one interception, right, where he jumped up and almost picked that off right at the line. And he had a couple breakups downfield as well. If he just had some more help in the rest of the secondary, I think he would have stood out just a little bit more.
Understood for sure, without a doubt. How about you, Nick? Any, I don't want to say final thoughts yet on defense. I mean, it's pretty clear what went wrong here in this game, but is there any other talking points that you wanted to bring up for us to discuss?
Yeah, there's one thing with Roquan Smith. He finished the game with 11 total tackles, sideline to side, seeing a lot of things that we're used to seeing with Roquan Smith. But, man, there was a play. It was in the third quarter, 3:51 left, 3rd down and 5, where Matthew Stafford completes the pass to Tyler Higbee, the tight end. And Roquan Smith read the play. He knew exactly where it was going, what the play design was, where he needed to be. But for some reason, Will, he hesitated. The ball gets completed to Tyler Higbee. It's a first down. The very next play, it's a 37-yarder to Higbee. And when I saw that happen, I'm like, that's how you know this defense isn't the same. And maybe Roquan Smith corrects himself and makes the play next time, because that's an interception every day. And I can't wait to go back and like clip the play and show it. But in 2018, and I know the Bears defense doesn't like hearing about that. Jaylen Johnson was asked about it. Khalil Mack was asked about it in these press conferences leading up to this game. But they made those plays. Those guys had the read, and they executed it. That didn't happen. That was a crucial point in the game. It was 14. Gosh, what was it? It was only 14-20 at that point. So, man, you get that pick. I don't even know if Roquan, maybe he gets caught. I don't know. But it's just when I saw that, man, it's like this is not the 2018 unit. We have to get that in our heads. And maybe it's just a bad first game for Sean Desai in his debut, but that really stuck with me because I know Roquan Smith is a great linebacker, but I just don't know why he didn't make that play. And I'll definitely put the play up later tonight so you guys are not like, what's going on for people in chat, whoever. But that one stood out to me, but I'll leave it at that, and we can continue this defensive talk.
All right, so the Bears had 0 tackles for a loss, only 4 quarterback hits, 2 for each, Akeem Hicks and Robert Quinn, who also got a half a sack along with Akeem Hicks. They did give it to him. Just want to make sure I put that one out there. Even though I thought, for the most part, Robert Quinn seemed like the player from last year, a little slow. Whenever he needed to change direction, it felt like the other player can take 4 steps to his 2. It's a little disheartening and not surprising, but I don't know. Getting Travis Gibson out there would have been nice. I saw Tachu out there once in a while, but get some fresh young legs out there and see what they can do. But Nick, you mentioned Sean Desai, and you said maybe this was just a bad first game for him. So I am curious to your thoughts on Sean Desai's debut. Was he, I don't know, a little too vanilla for your liking here?
I think so, because remember, I think in the previous show, we talked about saying that Sean Desai said this. He's going to put people in position to make plays. I just talked about Roquan Smith technically was, but those lack of tackle for losses, things that weren't happening on all 3 levels of defense, well, that's what he was supposed to fix. And I think it didn't happen in this game. So maybe, like I said, it's one game. Am I maybe overreacting to this? Could be. But you thought you would see those opportunities, I guess, happen a little bit more for those type of guys. And like you mentioned it, Will, like I didn't see Angelo Blackson enough. I didn't see Travis Gibson enough. Atachu enough. But you definitely saw number 94 without, and it looked weird without gloves. And he looked, and I had so many times in my notes, it's like, does Robert Quinn look lost? Because on play action plays, it seemed like Robert Quinn was so far into where the play action was happening. And then the opposite way was where the play was actually going. So it's just weird that people didn't get enough opportunities and people weren't put in positions to make those plays that he was talking about all offseason. So we have to wait and see what Sean decides, because that was not obviously an impressive debut.
Yeah, I know what you mean about Robert Quinn. There's that play action early in the game where I think he was like 2 gaps. Like he went all the way from the C gap all the way into the A gap, and then they had the play going right where he was supposed to be the whole time on the edge. And he's trying to chase him down, and that's not going to work. How about you, Mason? What are your thoughts on Sean Desai in his debut? I will admit that it is a tough task for any defensive coordinator in his debut game, let alone going up against Sean McVay, one of the better play callers in the NFL, with a brand new quarterback that, he was so excited to kind of unleash a bit. But curious your thoughts on Sean Desai's debut as we wrap up this defensive talk.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it right now for him. I mean, again, it is literally his first time as a coordinator, of this magnitude. You would lean on individuals who are veterans to step up and help you in that scenario. Now, obviously, it goes hand in hand. He needs to put them in the right position. But there were things that happened today that weren't, or they didn't seem like it was simply a coordinator's problem. It seemed like, you are a NFL veteran. You should know, Eddie Jackson and Gibson, that you need to touch someone that is laying on the ground. You should know that when you're in a cover 6, you should be the deepest person in your zone, right? You should be able to beat one-on-ones Khalil Mack. There should be more than 4 quarterback hits. And I know earlier, you said that, you didn't expect a lot of pressure. I expect some pressure, like a little bit would be great. Some hurries, some more hits, more than half a sack shared between Quinn and Hicks. That's unacceptable. Hicks, you want a bigger salary? You want a new contract? Play like it. Mac, come on, you got to step up. There's a lot of questionable stuff happening with the veterans. I have a hard time. The player's got to play, right? The coordinator can put you in the right position, but if you don't execute, that's on you as the player.
All right, Nick, last thoughts on defense? Do you have any more that you want to share or anything you want to get off your chest one last time?
I just think that the most apparent thing the Bears need to fix, and it should be one of the easier ones, is finding what needs to be communicated for these guys in the secondary to fix these blown coverages. And maybe that's too tall of a task because, like I've said, it's been happening more and more frequently with this Bears defense. But that's where I think you need to go to start these corrections. You take away those big plays for the Rams tonight, man, this is a completely different game, and they're just so wide open. So that's where this defensive coaching staff needs to start, because I think if you can correct those mistakes, you give yourself more of a chance to be in games for sure.
All right, let's move into the fourth quarter of this show. And let's begin with a quick hit here on special teams, which there wasn't a lot when you go for it 4 different times on fourth down. Whether that is passing up on a long punt or a short punt and passing up on a long field goal attempt. But Mason, I go to you first. Anything you wanted to mention about special teams?
Like you said, there's not a lot to discuss. Khalil Herbert obviously had that opening kick return, which was great. And, I had that moment where I was like, wow, this game is going to be different than we thought. And then it wasn't. And I know early on you could tell it was going to be a shootout. Matt Nagy going for it on every fourth down possible. But, you did just pay Cairo Santos to make some kicks. Maybe let him make some of those kicks, play the field position game. Obviously I barely left my couch today watching a lot of games, and there was a lot of instances, right? You punt the ball, you try to pin him deep, and you try to flip that field, because when you give someone like Matt Stafford a relatively short field, you're going to have a rough day. So there just seemed like there was a lack of trust in the special teams from, the coaching staff side. Execution wise, it wasn't bad. I mean, we didn't see a lot of punts to worry about the coverage, but the ones that did happen, it wasn't terrible. So, yeah, I mean, they were there, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of right. I don't know if the going for it on fourth down and passing up on field goals, if that was lack of trust. I think Santos earned trust, or is it just a pride issue with Nagy and the adamancy of like, oh, we can get this conversion, we can stay on the field, and we need to, because the field goal is just not going to cut it. Which will also would, I guess, be lack of trust in a defense as well. So many things. I'd be really curious to some of the insight over there. But how about you, Nick? Anything on special teams that you can add? Again, they were pretty much a non-factor in this game outside of the opening kickoff.
Yeah, they definitely were. Again, going back to that 4th and 15 that Matt Nagy, and I guess it technically isn't special teams, but it could have been an opportunity for Sanders to make it a 10-point game. At that point, the Bears had only had one reception go over 15 yards, and that was to Goodwin. And I don't even honestly remember that play for some reason, but it's like you haven't had much success trying to get those bigger type of plays, but yet you do go for around 4th and 15, and you decide not to make it potentially make it a 10-point game because you trust in your offense, you don't trust your defense. Whatever the decision came to go for it, it just didn't make sense, especially with how the offense was playing and just what they could have done with a Cairo Santos field goal.
You're right. I know it's a 2-score game regardless, but how that Bears offense was rolling, a field goal and a touchdown is much easier than 2 touchdowns, I thought. And then on top of that as well, you said it, if you can't get those chunk plays, what makes you think you can get that chunk play in the most obvious situation where the defense knows, like, well, they're going to have to try to get at least here, and they still throw it short, but still, it didn't make a lot of sense, at least to me. I know a lot of fans are like, no, I get going for it. I just feel like how this game went specifically, it didn't make much sense, because I would rather have a chance to score twice and one of them be a field goal and then play for overtime. And heck, if we would have went for a field goal earlier in this game, once or twice when we were in range, it could have been a 1-score game with a kick there. So there are some questions to be answered here as we kind of move forward. And yeah, those are disappointments to say the least. But guys, let's go ahead and let's call an audible. This is a point where when we discuss the game in full, is there anything that you wish would have happened differently? Anything that you could have changed in this game? And I'll go to Mason first.
Besides starting Justin Fields. Okay. I really wish that they hadn't. I'm all for being aggressive. Usually, especially that first year when Nagy was, going for a 4th down all the time, and it was awesome, and they were executing, which was one of the reasons it was awesome. But it felt like he was playing Madden today, where you just have this feeling where it's like, yeah, I can just chuck up a 20-yard pass, and even though it hasn't worked all day, it'll happen today. That they would have. Part of the issue was, again, it goes back to the lack of explosive plays, not throwing downfield. I just retweeted, somebody had looked at Allen Robinson's route tree from the game.
Okay, you saw that too?
Yeah, it's ridiculously short. Like, that's insane. So if I could audible, I know I'm kind of double dipping here, but one, not going for it on fourth down as often, get the points you can get, and two, let your receivers run. They're wide receivers. I know protection is a bit of a question, but that was ridiculous when I saw that graphic.
No, I think there was not one route ran by Robinson that was over 10 yards, if I saw that one correctly. And again, that was like
Hmm.
15 minutes ago, and I kind of peeked at it myself. But how about you, Nick? If you had to call an audible today, what would it be?
Yeah, there's two that really stand out. Again, going back to that third down play by Roquan Smith that wasn't made, and that allowed the Rams to have a 27-14 lead in the third quarter. But really, you can go to the first drive of the game for the
Yep.
Bears. You have a a great kickoff return by Khalil Herbert, a 40-yard run by David Montgomery, and you end up with 0 points. It's like you could have sent a message right there at SoFi Stadium, going down there and scoring a touchdown. Man, the confidence this group would have had, and the defense maybe would have just rallied off that. But that was sucked away when Andy Dalton throws an interception that I still don't know who he was actually targeting. And you change that, who knows? Who honestly knows?
That was exactly my audible, Nick, for the exact reason. I talked about it at the top of the show. Like, seizing all that momentum could have been everything in this game. The defense would have been, as you said, maybe a little bit more keyed in from the get-go. And if that was the case, instead of giving up those big plays and you already have a lead, we probably would have seen maybe a little bit more of an aggressive attack. I think the pieces would have fell in place a little bit easier for the Bears. Maybe the end result would have been the same, but it would have been an easier path for the Bears to potentially come out with a victory. So good call there. Nick, let's find out who's going to be our Week 1 MVB, Most Valuable Bears. First time getting to do this season. Very excited. Let's go to Nick first. I have a hunch this should be consensus, but maybe someone's trying to be too cute and pull a Nagy. We'll find out. Nick?
No, let's just be, direct with this, be honest. It's David Montgomery for how he played and how he carried this team, broke countless tackles, was physical, came back from an injury. And the first run, it was like almost an 8-yard run that he had. First play back with 9 seconds left in the third quarter. So David Montgomery really showed that he has added that speed, and he still has that physicalness, that vision to find the cutback lanes. But he is deserving for the MVP because without him, man, I don't know what this offense. They scored 14. They definitely don't do that without how he played tonight. So David Montgomery's the MVP.
All right. Thank you, by the way. Mason, how about you, man? Who's going to be your MVP Week 1?
Yeah, I refuse to overthink this. It has to be David Montgomery. Without him, this game would have been a worse route than it already was. Imagine what this game would have looked like if it was only Damian Williams back there or something else like that. Like, he carried the team and made it look closer than it really was.
Perfect. You guys did what you needed to do. The MVP is David Montgomery. I can do the clean sweep over here. He was by far the most fun player to watch tonight in a Bears uniform, outside of when Justin Fields was on the field a bit. But Justin was just, I think it's fun to watch for a different reason. But the plays that Montgomery had, the tenacity in which he runs the football with, his ability to stay up, not go down, he inspired me watching this game. Like, he got me the most fired up all night long, and that has to do the same to this Bears team, this Bears offense. And just like the end of last year, this Bears offense is running through David Montgomery. He had a tough task, right? The Bears, he had over 100 yards today, and the Rams last season, at least, never allowed a single 100-yard rusher, and he was able to do it here Week 1 against that defense. So I think that's a huge testament to David Montgomery, because even though there were some holes to work with here today, a lot of those yards were due to his effort, his vision, and his speed and his quickness. So kudos to David Montgomery for being this Week 1 MVP. Quickly, guys, what grade would you give this game? I haven't done that, I think, in a while, and I did poll Twitter, which may be scary to check in on. I will, though. But, Nick, how about you? If you had to give it a letter grade, what would it be?
Look, 34-14. They did play better than the Packers, though. But that doesn't factor into this grade. I'll give it like a D+. Yes, we saw some things that were a little bit better offensively, moving the ball, getting the first downs. Didn't get the points, though. And when you have those explosive plays on defense, and when you add that with the lack of point production on offense, you get blown out. And that's exactly what the Bears did by 20 points. So, yeah, I'll give it a D+.
D plus for Nick. Mason, how about you?
Straight up D. Like there was very little to get excited about. Like we just talked about, David Montgomery was really the only bright spot. The defense was horrendous. The special teams was non-existent because it wasn't allowed to exist for some reason. The offense was as boring as it always is outside of Montgomery. Dink and dunk and poor play design and questionable this, questionable that, weird coaching decisions the whole way. It just, again, the score did not really show how in control the Rams were. If you just looked at it at halftime, but when you actually watched it live, you felt how rough and how big of a gap there was between these two teams.
All right, I'm going to give it a D as well. I thought even though we had those bright spots, when it mattered most, whether it be on offense, whether it be on defense, they didn't show up. They couldn't rise to the occasion one bit. On third down on offense, those miscues on defense, and going 0 for 4 on fourth down is an ugly stat, to say the least. So I think when it mattered most, even the Dalton sack, that was my monster moment. Like the Bears had a chance to make it a one-score game, and they got knocked back instead. So I feel like for those reasons, not playing complementary football one bit, not being able to help one another out, and each side of the ball having some serious question marks and some serious issues in this game, it's hard to give it a much higher grade than that. And there's about 1,000 people who responded to our Twitter poll, and it was, if I remember correctly, 50% gave it a D so far, and we're looking at 37% gave it an F, 13% gave it a C. I gave B as an option. Not one single person gave it a B. All right, gentlemen.
That's very accurate.
Right? All right, so we need to do one last thing, and that is jumping into our 2-minute warning. This is where we just have a couple minutes to wrap up our thoughts on this game and start looking to the season ahead. So, Mason, I'm going to go over to you first. What's going to be your 2-minute warning? You are officially on the clock.
All right, first of all, I'm grabbing this again. So, again, Andy Dalton was not bad. He really wasn't. He was an average quarterback, but he needs everything around him to be perfect. And it just wasn't, right? The defense isn't what it used to be. It's not elite anymore. But you can win with an average defense. You can win with average special teams. You know how you do that? With an elite quarterback. And yes, I know that, the Rams have a great defense. There wasn't a lot of time to throw. But you know how you can create more time to throw? With a mobile quarterback. Somebody that they have to worry about the run. Someone that they have to worry about a cannon of an arm. And who is accurate with deep throws. And is able to do all those things. You know who can do that? This guy right here, right? There are problems with this team. This is not a Super Bowl contender. This is not even arguably a legit playoff team. Because I said this before last year. I didn't think last year they were a playoff team. They snuck in because they just happened to add another team on, which was, just a rule change. The way that you end up filling a lot of those holes is by letting your better quarterback play. The rest of the stuff you have to worry about, you have to deal with later. Sean Desai's got to figure out what the heck happened with the defense, right? We got to figure out what's happening with tackle. Hopefully Larry Borum at least can come back. I'm not the most confident that Peters is going to be able to turn around real quick if it is truly a soft tissue issue. And that's going to all get decided. But you know how you make an offensive line's life easier? Again, a mobile quarterback. And when Justin was out there, it was only 4 plays, and 2 of the plays were a waste of time, to be completely honest. But the 2 plays he was out there, he looked solid. It's not like he was freaked out. It's not like, his path was inaccurate. It's not like he shied away when he was running. Put him out there. Let him play. Let's stop playing this game. The best thing for Justin Fields is to play. Let him play.
Good stuff there, Mason. I'll put myself on the clock for a 2-minute warning here. Unfortunately, a lot of this was expected, and that's why we're not entering this post-game show maybe as sour as we would in years past when it comes to some of these games, right? Nagy's now 1 of 3 in his primetime games. We kind of know how these go, primetime opening games, I should say. And then on top of that as well, I don't know, I thought we hit on the issues really well in our preview show. We said it's the secondary, and we said offensive line, although I thought they played a little bit better than we really thought they would heading into this game. But the secondary, those issues, that's maybe my biggest concern heading into a week 2. I know it's early, and they'll hopefully have time to figure out these communication issues. Throwing in random nickel guys here and there is not going to help. And not playing the preseason, those happen. You saw them across the league all day today. Unfortunately for the Rams, they didn't have those issues. So that was kind of exasperated on our part here. And then looking at this Bears offense, definitely reason for optimism. They could not run the ball this well early on last year. Like they had a couple of games, but to come out of the gate running like they did today against this Rams defense is a big promising sign for me. I got to see how those injuries shake out. Andy Dalton felt like a Mitchell Trubisky plus, like a little bit, right? Like just a little bit better, but still averaging 5 yards per pass. And I know the pressure was in the pocket a lot, but Dalton did a good job of maneuvering it, staying in there, and making the right throw. But we still need to find a way to get these explosive plays, these chunk plays, and be a quick fire offense with this speed. If we're not going to be able to tap into all this speed that the Bears work so hard to get, why did you do it? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So it's only week 1, so I'm not going to overreact on it. But if they're not looking at this Bengals defense and finding out how can we take some shots, how can we leverage a Marquise Goodwin, a Damiere Byrd to get downfield and just see what we can do, take some chances, I don't know what this coaching staff is doing. So definitely a rough game, but to be expected. So I'm kind of even keel, weirdly enough. And Nick, I'll go over to you now for your 2-minute warning and go.
I think Matt Nagy really needs to look at himself in the mirror and just kind of ask himself, what do we want to be as an offense? And if it really is what we saw today, dink and dunk, then there has been no progress of what he has learned in his previous 3 years up until this point. And now that he has Justin Fields there on the bench waiting, you need to be honest with yourself, and for whatever promises were made to Andy Dalton, and you need to do what's best for his football team, because that's what he said he was going to do. Do what's best for the Chicago Bears. And if you're going to have Justin Fields only come in periodically when he's cold off the bench, how is that better for him? Wouldn't it be better if he was in a groove, playing and starting a game? So a lot of what Mason was saying is that we need to see him early on, especially because of the things you also said. Well, there's a lot more speed on this team. I think you can take advantage of that with a guy who has the arm that Justin Fields does. But it's not just offensively. It starts with the quarterback. The Bears do have some light there with David Montgomery. You could be a team that pounds the rock, but you need a defense that can back you up. So going to Sean Desai now, you need to figure this out. You've been given such a great opportunity to be the defense coordinator of the Chicago Bears. Fix this problem. Fix this communication issue. Have Eddie Jackson, but that's supposed to be his guy too, being a safeties coach. He cannot play like that. If he plays like that, he's a liability. Number 4 is a liability on this defense, and after week 1, he currently is. So there needs to be a balance of running the football with good defense, but man, offensively, you need to take shots. You can't allow a defense to dictate what you do, and that's exactly what happened tonight. The Rams made the Bears play this short game, and Matt Nagy just took it and just tried to beat them at their own game, and that's not going to work.
Wow, really well done there, Nick. Strong 2-minute warning. I put myself on a clock for some reason. There we go. That's the one that goes twice. One was enough. After this game, it is almost 1 a.m. my time, but really well done there, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and just close the show with that. So thank you to everyone here tuning in live. I think we had over like 300 people at one point, and again, it's late. The Bears lost. I really appreciate you guys showing out here for the live show. If you haven't yet, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel. That way you never miss another episode of the Chicago Audible. And if you're listening to the podcast, help us out by giving us a review over on Apple Podcasts. Join the 720 Bears fans if have already done so. It goes a long way with helping us reach more Bears fans like you, as well as when we're looking at potential sponsors for our future. So up next, we'll begin looking at our Week 2 opponent, the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll be meeting the opponent in just a couple of days, so stay on the lookout for that interview with a very special guest. And the Bears lose 34-14. They're 0-1, but again, the rest of the NFC North is too. So it's wide open still from here. So enjoy your Monday. Not a Victory Monday yet. We'll have one of those soon enough. But until next time, bear down, Chicago.